So, I'm really happy that today the founding members are all here. Johnathan Blake, Jeremy Pelt, and myself, and then of course James Burton. And I actually came up with the name Black Art Jazz Collective. And at first, honestly, it was met with a little bit of resistance. I think because we're all concerned that the name was in fact exclusionary. But that's not the case at all. And also the other concern was that we didn't want to seem militant with the name of a group like Black Art Jazz Collective. But I think when we talked about it more and when we thought about it, I mean, there's nothing wrong with overtly celebrating the fact that jazz is Black American music and overtly celebrating Black culture. And at the particular time that we thought of this group was around the time that a lot of people were talking about talking about jazz being everyone's music. And while it is everyone's music in a certain sense, and everyone can play the music and everyone can innovate, and now it's become a global phenomenon, the origins of the music remain the same. So I think ultimately we decided that we shouldn't feel bad about celebrating the fact that this music is Black music and call it Black art. Anyone else want to jump in?
Yeah, I think I think also, as Wayne mentioned, we wanted to, get together and celebrate some of our black leaders, our black heroes. Not all that were musicians, but also it was a way for us to tell the story as opposed to having someone else tell it for us. So, when Wayne brought it to our attention, yeah, there was a little bit of resistance, but then it was like, man, this is a great way to really celebrate the art and also, these great figures throughout history who I think sometimes are not talked about enough. So, I feel like sometimes it is an uncomfortable conversation to have, but I feel like it is a necessary one to have. So I'm glad that we actually did it.
Good trouble.
Good trouble, good trouble.
Anyone want to jump in?
Yeah, I'll jump in. Thinking about this, I guess it's more about I think a lot about the system of jazz education and how we how we transmit information. And, one of the things I find when I'm working with young people is that there's, music of the African diaspora is transmitted through, there's an oral transmission that exists. And I don't always see the translation of this sort of sense of oral transmission within, high schools, universities, any sort of jazz education programs. They sort of miss, there's this way that we learn music from mentors, and it was sort of translated into some sort of jazz education curriculum that I especially see with young people. They expect to see a certain kind of way of learning music, and so they miss it when you're dealing with masters of the music. It's not always just one way of transmitting information, and so I think it's it's not necessarily overtly racist, but it's a sense that in sort of black spaces we learn in a particular way, and I don't always see that translated into classrooms in secondary education or in universities. So I think for me, one of the ways that we can sort of move on in terms of just making this how we study jazz and how we sort of transmit this information make it more readily available for folks in a really positive way is to really look at developing this translation of how oral transmission works and what that would be in a university setting and what that would be in a high school or in a middle school or elementary school.
Yeah, some great points, and I think, in a way, because of that oral transmission of information, the art could be looked down upon.
Exactly.
In certain arenas, and of course we've all experienced that. And as educators in a variety of institutions, we're always struggling to have the music legitimized. And it was a constant struggle as a student. I was at the Hart School where Jackie McLean started that African American Music Department. And of course, it wasn't called the African American Music Department in the beginning. And he was constantly struggling with the people there to have the music legitimized. I'm actually very, very glad that Yale has me teaching this jazz improvisation course there, because I'm introducing, in some instances, I'm introducing the music to classical musicians who they respect jazz from afar, but they don't really know anything about it. They don't know what it is. And in some ways along those same lines, sometimes I feel like they like the music, but they feel like there's nothing that they could do, and it's almost like, black people being good at playing basketball, and black people being good at singing, black people being good at dancing. They're probably good at jazz too. And it's just that's because that's just they do it. But they don't realize that just because we learn it orally, or there's a his tradition of that, it doesn't mean that we haven't studied Western classical music. It doesn't mean that we haven't studied composition. I mean, taking a jazz solo is essentially composing on the spot. When we play a 7-minute piece, we're composing 7 minutes of music in 7 minutes worth of time. as opposed to composers that could take 7 years to compose a piece of music. You know, so it requires a lot of fast thinking, it requires a lot of theoretical understanding, and there's a lot that goes into it. So I'm actually glad I got a chance to introduce these students to that at Yale, so that they'd understand really the intricacies of this music. And that's something that, again, as Rashaan pointed out, if this music was taught in elementary schools, middle schools, high schools, alongside American history, which is where it should be taught, and, you know, if people understood how sophisticated Duke Ellington and Thelonious Monk and what an innovator Charlie Parker was, then maybe there would be more of a tradition of appreciation as opposed to otherwise. Anyone else?
Yeah, I was thinking about that. You know, I had a conversation with another musician friend of mine, and even to this day, he was saying that as recently as last year or maybe the year before, one of these prestigious colleges of music recently got this huge endowment. And the stipulation with the endowment was that none of the money could go towards the jazz program. It could only go to the classical.
I'm sorry to jump in on your comment, but that was actually me, and that was the institution I worked at. And the number was $460 million. And it was earmarked for every department: drama, dance, instrumental music, historical music, cats playing lutes and lyres and stuff like that.
Right.
But jazz, not a dime.
Exactly.
And this is American music.
And this is American music, so it's like, you know, there's still, you know, like you said, you know, we still have to make sure that we, you know, a lot of our African American musicians, but also teachers, educators, to get in these positions so that, you know, something like this doesn't happen any longer. I mean, you know, this is so recent that it's, you know, it's still going on. You know, I remember a great friend of mine who passed away, a bassist named Chris White. He was going to school at Manhattan School of Music back in the day. He was studying classical, but he decided that he just wanted to walk the blues. One of the instructors heard him and kicked him out the school. And he was not allowed to, you know, continue his education. So, you know, there's still a long way we have to go. But, you know, I feel like, you know, that's why these conversations are really important to have. They can be uncomfortable, but they're really important for us to have.
And again, that's systemic, right? Because if it was integrated in the schools early on, we wouldn't have these struggles
Right.
later
Exactly.
on. You know, when I first started playing music, some of my family members, I'm a little bit embarrassed to say, well, one of my family members was like, "Oh, you play jazz? That's white people music."
Right.
That's what they said. And it's because what their image of jazz was old white Dixieland guys playing clarinets and they were like, "That's jazz, it's corny. That's not what I do. It has nothing to do with what I do." I mean, that was their impression of it. This is not really taught.
I remember having like one of the directors of music in my middle school, like the regional middle school. She said that jazz would mess up our embouchures or something like that. So, yeah, I think if we just really had an opportunity, if we had people who really understood all the like sort of intricacies and the holistic sense of the way that we learn this music, whether it's like oral transmission, you know, all the theory, everything that we study, if people really were like dedicated to an understanding of the music more wholly than just the sort of little pockets of information folks have, it prepares folks for later on, you know, learning later on, and it sort of, you know, it's a way to erase some of those misconceptions folks have about this music.
So my song, Involuntary Servitude, that wording is actually taken from the 13th Amendment, which we know the 13th Amendment abolished slavery and involuntary servitude, except for as punishment for a crime. And that really laid the groundwork for our modern day prison system, wherein a disproportionate number of African Americans are incarcerated. And actually, just after slavery was abolished, it was common practice that former slaves were incarcerated for simple things as vagrancy, just not having a job or a place to live. And they could be sentenced to hard labor for anywhere between 30 days and a year. So that's involuntary servitude. The piece Twin Towers that appears on our latest album, Ascension, is very special to me. As many people know, I studied with the great legendary alto saxophonist, teacher, and activist, Jackie McLean. And while I was at the Hart School, one of my close friends and also a student at the school named Jimmy Green and I had a band together that actually Mr. McLean, J-Mac, put together for us, and he called the band Twin Towers. That was his nickname for us, the Twin Towers. And he actually wrote this piece, Twin Towers. The Black Art Jazz Collective, we try to do mostly original music, but we made this one exception because it was written by our hero, Jackie McLean. And he wrote the tune Twin Towers for myself and Jimmy Green. He played it with his sextet, sometimes septet, but he never recorded it. So this is actually the first recording of Twin Towers.
Who's next?
Check 1, 2. So my tune Tulsa, off our latest releases, is obviously about the 1921 events, the Greenwood area of Tulsa, Oklahoma. And it's often referred to as a race riot, but that's a misnomer because it was actually a massacre. And my mother's side of the family is from Oklahoma, and throughout my whole life growing up, we never heard about this, and none of the elders in my family talked about it. And I think my mother has 8 or 9 uncles, folks that were born either at that time or just after that, and no one spoke about this. And it didn't appear in the historical curriculum in Oklahoma public schools until last year. So it's the whole thing's been kind of a cover-up. And so me writing this tune was just my way of working through the feelings about that event and the entire conspiracy.
Can you talk about Ascension?
Well, Ascension, the title was just originally a device that I was using. I use a lot of different little devices to try to come up with different tunes, and this one happened to be ascending key centers, which is kind of a bit nerdy, not such a deep meaning. doesn't have such a deep meaning, but later on it kind of added meaning when we recorded it, because the other song I wrote was for Mr. Harold Mayburn, and so it called Iron Man. That was one of his nicknames. And so that was kind of his ascension, you know, in a way. I kind of dedicated both of those to him. Mr. Harold Mayburn was a great influence in my life and very encouraging. And, you know, one of the greatest piano players ever, so, you know, we love him. But back to the more technical side of it, it was just the key centers going up in half steps, really, is why it's called Ascension. And I was trying to kind of hide that fact, you know, yeah.
Cool.
One, two, three.
I think it's honestly, it's not really meant to reflect the lineage as much as it's meant to really expound on what's been laid before and bring forth our own concepts and sensibilities and our own experiences of what's happening now into what we're writing. And in that way, if you want to call it reflection, I mean, that's exactly what those aforementioned groups were doing. When you talk about Cannonball Adderley and Art Blakey, was they were reflecting their times. You know, I think, and this is a loose quote, but Nina Simone said an artist's duty is to, for their music to reflect the time, their times. Again, that's a loose quote, but I mean, that's essentially what we're doing, is we're doing something that's reflecting now.
You want to say?
Yeah, well, while we're also, like Jeremy said, while we're reflecting what's going on now, we take inspiration from what came before us, the saying, you have to crawl before you can walk. So we all take inspiration by things that we've heard before us. But, there comes a time where we have to, be able to have our own voice. And part of the way that we develop our own voices is through our own compositions. So we do take inspiration from, the heroes and sheroes that come before us. But, we have to also make it our own somehow. So that's one I wanted to add.
Yeah, it's true. Also along those lines, I mean, with this band, one of the great things is that we play mostly original music, and all those groups, while they did, of course, play standards as well in their interpretation of them and arrangements of them. They did allow the musicians in that band, like the Messengers, and even if you think of Woody Shaw and my mentor Jackie McLean, they all allowed all the band members to write music and to just explore together. And I think we definitely keep within that tradition. And I think also for me that tradition of 1 foot in the past and 1 foot in the future, I think we try to keep that as well. Also something else that I think of is, this music, that we call jazz, is really always been a consistent tool for integration, right? and for conversation. And we are blessed that we travel all over the world with this unit. We go to Ukraine, we go to Asia, we go to all kinds of places. Some places that have their own jazz, some places that have none. And we are constantly asked all kinds of provocative questions about the music, about us, our culture. And we're always depending on where we are, in uncomfortable situations that we have to deal with. And I think, interestingly enough, that's a tradition that, these musicians, the aforementioned musicians, were all dealing with, playing this music in the 60s. I mean, they're playing this music in the middle of the civil rights movement. I mean, so just imagine, I watched the other day this wonderful video of Sonny Stitt, because his birthday was just a few weeks ago. Great video of him and Dizzy playing, smiling, having such a beautiful time. And you look out in the audience and it's all white audience, which is great, it's beautiful. But they were all there celebrating Dizzy and Sonny Stitt and Ray Brown, listening to their music. Meanwhile, those cats, depending on where they were, couldn't necessarily sit at the lunch counter. So the music was a source for integration, and it still is. It still is.
Really quickly, I just wanted to say that jazz was integrated something like 9 or 10 years before baseball.
3, 4,
Black Art Jazz Collective. This is what we do. We play music at the highest level possible. We compose original music, and we celebrate Black culture and our African American icons that have inspired us. And we inspire and push each other, not just musically, but also personally. So thanks for listening. Once again, that's Johnathan Blake. He's our drummer, one of the founding members. Victor Gould is our pianist. Rashaan Carter is our bassist. The wonderful Jeremy Pelt, founding member and trumpeter. James Burton III, founding member and trombonist, and yours truly, Wayne Escoffery. Keep swinging.